They thought she was weak. They thought she was just the poor, pregnant wife who married into a dynasty she didn't understand. At the Kensington family gala, Serafina, the woman trying to steal her husband and her life, pushed Elara to the breaking point, stripping her of her dignity in front of the city's elite. But in a game of chess played by billionaires, the quietest player is often the deadliest. Watch what happens when the cruel mistress thinks she's won the crown, only for the terrifying father-in-law to reveal a secret deed that changes everything. This is the story of the mistress, the wife, and the true owner of the mansion. You won't believe the twist. The tires of the Uber crunched over the pristine white gravel of the driveway, a sound that felt inextricably loud in the hushed opulence of Highgrove Manor. Elara Vance sat in the back seat, her hands resting protectively over the 8-month swell of her abdomen. The baby kicked, a sharp reminder of the life she was protecting. But even that distinct rhythm couldn't calm the erratic beating of her heart. "This is as close as I can get, miss," the driver said, eyeing the wrought iron gates and the security detail that looked more like a private militia than event staff. "It's fine. Thank you," Elara whispered. She struggled out of the car, the heavy velvet of her maternity gown catching on the door handle. It was a dress she had bought second-hand, a deep emerald green that she hoped looked regal. But standing before the colossus of the Kensington estate, she felt like a child playing dress-up. Highgrove Manor was not just a house. It was a statement. Built in the 1920s by the industrialist titans of the Kensington line, it loomed against the gray Seattle sky like a fortress of limestone and arrogance. Tonight was the patriarch's 70th birthday gala, an event that was less about celebration and more about the consolidation of power. Elara took a breath, tasting rain and expensive cologne in the air. She was the wife of Liam Kensington, the eldest son, yet she was arriving alone in a hired car. Liam had promised to pick her up. "I have a meeting with the board, Elara. It's crucial. I'll meet you there," he had said, his voice clipped, devoid of the warmth that had defined their first year of marriage. That was before Serafina Thorne had entered their lives. As Elara waddled toward the massive oak doors, she saw them. Standing at the top of the grand staircase, under the warm glow of the portico lights, was Liam. He looked devastatingly handsome in his bespoke tuxedo, the kind that cost more than Elara's father had made in a year. But his arm wasn't waiting for her. It was linked firmly with a woman who looked as if she had been carved from diamonds and ice. Serafina Thorne. Serafina was everything Elara was not: sharp, dangerous, and dripping in old money confidence. She wore a dress of liquid silver that clung to a body honed by Pilates and personal chefs. She was laughing at something Liam said, her hand resting possessively on his chest, right over his heart. Elara's stomach churned, not from the pregnancy, but from the raw humiliation. Serafina wasn't just a colleague. She was the consultant brought in to restructure Kensington Global, and in the process, she had restructured Elara's marriage. "Elara, you made it!" Serafina's voice rang out, cutting through the ambient chatter of arriving guests. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. Liam looked up, his expression shifting from amusement to a flustered guilt. He pulled his arm away from Serafina, but the damage was done. The paparazzi stationed near the entrance had already captured the image. The air and the beauty, with the frumpy, pregnant wife struggling up the stairs in the background. "Liam," Elara said, winded as she reached the top step. "I thought you were sending the car back for me." "Oh, honey," Serafina interjected before Liam could speak. She stepped forward, the scent of Chanel No. 5 overwhelming Elara's senses. "Liam was just so busy with the prep, and honestly, with your condition, we thought the town car might be too cramped. The Uber was spacious, wasn't it?" Serafina's eyes dropped to Elara's swollen belly with a look of distaste, as if Elara were carrying a parasite rather than the Kensington heir. "I'm his wife, Serafina, not a logistics problem," Elara said, her voice shaking slightly. Liam stepped between them, his hand hovering near Elara's back but not touching her. "Elara, don't start. Serafina has been organizing the entire event for Dad. She's just trying to help." "Helping by leaving your pregnant wife in the rain?" Elara countered, looking at her husband. She searched his eyes for the man she had married, the gentle architect who loved sketching in the park, but she only saw the terrified executive trying to please his father and his handler. "Come inside, Elara," Liam muttered, checking his watch. "And please try to stay off your feet. You look tired." "She looks exhausted, Liam," Serafina corrected, flashing a smile that didn't reach her predatory eyes. "Maybe she should rest in the guest wing. The main hall is going to be so crowded. We wouldn't want an accident." The guest wing, not the family quarters. The message was clear. "You are a guest here, a temporary one." Elara straightened her spine, channeling a strength she didn't feel. "I will be by my husband's side. It's his father's birthday." She walked past them, entering the lion's den. The grand hall was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. But as Elara walked in, the temperature seemed to drop. She could feel the eyes of the elite dissecting her. She heard the whispers. "That's the waitress Liam married? Look at her. She doesn't fit, does she? I heard Serafina is the one Alistair really wants as a daughter-in-law." Elara placed a hand on her belly. "Hold on, little one," she thought. "We just have to survive the night." To understand the cruelty of that night, one had to understand the rise of Serafina Thorne. She was not merely a mistress in the traditional sense, she was a corporate weapon. 3 years ago, Kensington Global had been facing a liquidity crisis. Alistair Kensington, the terrifying patriarch whose approval Liam desperately craved, had hired Thorne Consulting to audit the firm. Serafina was the lead auditor. She was brilliant, ruthless, and possessed a Harvard MBA that she wielded like a scalpel. She had saved the company millions by slashing redundancies, a polite term for firing loyal employees. In the process, she had identified Liam as the weak link. Liam was soft, an artist at heart who hated the cutthroat world of finance. Serafina didn't push him out. She seduced him with power. She made him feel like a king while she pulled the strings. Elara, on the other hand, was a nobody. She had met Liam in a coffee shop where she worked while finishing her degree in social work. They had fallen in love over conversations about books and dreams of a quiet life. When they married, Alistair had refused to attend the wedding. He viewed Elara as a gold digger, a waitress with a womb, looking for a payout. Serafina played on this dynamic perfectly. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Elara found a quiet corner near a towering ice sculpture of a lion, the Kensington crest. She needed water, but the waiters seemed to be ignoring her, gravitating instead toward the VIP circle where Serafina was holding court. "Thirsty?" Elara jumped. Standing behind her was a man she hadn't expected to see so early. It was Arthur, not Alistair, the father, but Arthur, the family's estranged uncle. He was the black sheep, a man who had walked away from the family fortune to become a history professor. He wore a tuxedo that was 20 years out of style and frayed at the cuffs. "Uncle Arthur," Elara exhaled, a genuine smile breaking through her anxiety. "I didn't think you came to these things." "I don't," Arthur grunted, handing her a glass of sparkling water he had snagged. But Alistair insisted, said he had an announcement regarding the estate. The old buzzard loves his drama. Arthur looked at Elara with kind, sad eyes. He was the only Kensington who had welcomed her. When Elara had been hospitalized for severe morning sickness early in the pregnancy, Arthur was the one who brought her ginger tea and books, while Liam was away on business with Seraphina. "How are you holding up, kid?" Arthur asked, glancing toward the center of the room where Liam and Seraphina were clinking glasses with the mayor. "I feel like an intruder in my own life," Elara admitted, her voice trembling. "Seraphina. She's everywhere, Arthur. She makes decisions for Liam. She manages his schedule. She even redecorated our apartment because she said my taste was provincial. And Liam just lets her." Arthur sighed, sipping his scotch. "Liam is afraid of his father. Seraphina is Alistair's proxy. She's not sleeping with Liam just for pleasure, Elara. She's sleeping with him to control the legacy. She wants Highgrove. She wants the Kensington name." "I don't care about the money," Elara whispered. "I just want my husband back. I want my baby to have a father." "You have a good heart, Elara. Too good for this Shark Tank," Arthur warned. "But be careful tonight. Seraphina has been bragging about a final solution to the Elara problem. She thinks if she humiliates you enough, you'll run back to your parents in Ohio and leave the baby here." Elara's grip on the water glass tightened until her knuckles turned white. "I will never leave my child." "Good," Arthur said, "because you're going to need that fire. Look." Elara followed his gaze. The music had stopped. Alistair Kensington, the man who owned half the city, was tapping a spoon against his champagne flute. The room fell silent. Alistair was a small man, physically withered by age, but his eyes were hard as flint. He stood on the dais, flanked by Liam and Seraphina. Elara wasn't up there. She was in the back, behind an ice sculpture. "Welcome, everyone," Alistair's voice rasped over the microphone. "Tonight is not just a celebration of my 70 years. It is a celebration of the future of Kensington Global, and the future of Highgrove Manor." Seraphina beamed, stepping slightly forward, assuming the role of the matriarch in waiting. "For decades, this house has been the seat of our power," Alistair continued, "and tonight I will finally sign the deed of transfer. I am passing Highgrove to the person who has shown the most ruthless dedication to our family's survival." A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone looked at Liam. Liam looked at Seraphina. Seraphina looked like a cat who had just swallowed the canary. Elara felt a cold pit in her stomach. If Seraphina got the house, if she controlled the estate, Elara would be homeless. Liam would never kick Seraphina out. "But first," Alistair said, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed with laser precision on Elara in the shadows. "We must address the elephant in the room, or should I say the charity case." The room gasped. The insult hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Elara froze. She had expected coldness, but this public evisceration was new. Seraphina leaned into the microphone, her voice smooth as silk. "Oh, Alistair, don't be so harsh. Elara does her best. It's not her fault she doesn't understand our ways." She turned to the crowd, flashing a sympathetic smile. "You see, we've had a bit of a crisis. We discovered recently that, well, maintaining the family image is difficult when some members insist on dragging it down." Seraphina snapped her fingers. A waiter appeared, not with a tray of drinks, but with a small, folding metal chair, the kind used for card tables. He placed it right next to the grand head table, where the velvet-covered seats for the family were arranged. "Liam, darling," Seraphina cooed. "Since the seating chart was so tight, and Elara is so large right now, we thought she'd be more comfortable here, at the end, where she has more room." It was a devastating visual. The head table was set with fine china and gold cutlery for Alistair, Liam, Seraphina, and the board members. And there, off to the side, like a servant's stool, was the metal chair for the pregnant wife. Elara felt the blood rush to her face. It wasn't about the chair, it was the symbolism. You are not family. You are an afterthought. She looked at Liam. Liam, are you going to let them do this? Liam looked at his father, then at Serafina, and finally at his wife. He looked pained, sweating under the lights. Elara, please, just sit. Don't make a scene. It's just for dinner. Dad is in a mood. A mood? Elara's voice rose, trembling with hormones and rage. They are treating me like a dog, Liam. Lower your voice, Serafina hissed, stepping off the dais to confront Elara on the floor. The crowd parted, sensing blood. You ungrateful little girl! Look at this room! Look at these people! You don't belong here! You trapped Liam with that pregnancy, and now you think you own the place? You're lucky we let you inside the gates. Serafina reached out and touched the cheap fabric of Elara's dress. Polyester? At a Kensington Gala? You're embarrassing him. Elara slapped her hand away. I am his wife. For now, Serafina whispered, low enough that only Elara could hear. But once Alistair signs that deed tonight, I run this house. And my first act as Mistress of Highgrove will be to evict you. Liam can visit the baby on weekends. Maybe. The cruelty took Elara's breath away. She stumbled back, hitting the table behind her. A glass of red wine wobbled and fell, splashing onto the pristine white tablecloth and splattering onto Serafina's silver dress. The room went deathly silent. Serafina looked down at the red stain, then up at Elara with eyes full of theatrical horror. You clumsy cow, look what you've done. This is haute couture. I didn't mean to, Elara stammered. Security! Serafina screamed, dropping the mask of civility entirely. Get her out of here, she's drunk. Look at her, stumbling around, destroying property. Two burly guards stepped forward. No, Elara cried, clutching her belly. I haven't had a drop to drink. Liam, help me. Liam took a step forward. Serafina, stop, she's not drunk. Quiet, Liam, Alistair barked from the head table. If she cannot compose herself, she should leave. Serafina is right. This is a disgrace. The guards took Elara by the arms. She was 8 months pregnant, tired and humiliated. She looked at her husband, the father of her child, and watched as he lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. He chose his inheritance over his wife. Tears hot with shame streamed down Elara's face. She let the guards guide her toward the exit, the sound of Serafina's triumphant scoff following her. But just as they reached the double doors, a booming sound echoed through the hall. It wasn't a microphone. It was the heavy, rhythmic thud of a cane striking the marble floor. Thud. 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 The sound came from the main entrance. The doors swung open, pushing the guards and Elara back. Standing there wasn't a guest. It was a legal team. 6 lawyers in charcoal suits, carrying briefcases. And leading them was not Alistair, but a man no one expected to see in a position of authority. It was Uncle Arthur. But he wasn't looking at the floor anymore. He was standing tall, and beside him stood a weary, older woman in a wheelchair. Alistair's reclusive mother, Grandmother Rose, whom Serafina had claimed was too senile to attend. Unhand her. Arthur's voice wasn't the gentle mumble of the professor anymore. It was a command that rattled the crystal. The guards hesitated, looking at Alistair. I said. Arthur walked into the room, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. Take your hands off the lady of the house. Serafina laughed, a shrill, nervous sound. Arthur, you're drunk. The lady of the house is right here. She pointed to herself, then to Alistair. Alistair owns Highgrove. Arthur smiled, but it was a wolfish, predatory grin. He reached into the briefcase of the lead attorney and pulled out a thick, yellowed document with a wax seal. That, Arthur said, pointing at Alistair, is where you are all mistaken. Alistair doesn't own Highgrove. He never has. The silence in the grand hall was absolute, a stark contrast to the orchestral swelling that had filled it moments before. All eyes were fixed on the yellowed parchment in Uncle Arthur's hand. Even the ice sculpture seemed to sweat under the tension. Alistair Kensington, a man who had made grown CEOs weep in boardrooms, looked at the document with a flicker of genuine fear. "Arthur, put that away. This is neither the time nor the place for your historical theatrics." "On the contrary, brother," Arthur said, his voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "You were about to sign a deed transferring ownership of Highgrove. You cannot transfer what you do not possess." Seraphina, recovering from her initial shock, stepped forward, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble. "This is ridiculous. Alistair has lived here for 40 years. He is the head of the family." "He is the occupant," Arthur corrected, stepping aside to reveal the elderly woman in the wheelchair. "But the ownership of Highgrove was placed in an irrevocable trust by our father, Grandfather Elias. He knew Alistair's ambitious nature. He knew that one day Alistair might trade our heritage for capital. So he left the deed to the one person he trusted to keep the family soul intact." Arthur placed a hand on the wheelchair. "The deed belongs to the matriarch. It belongs to Rose." A ripple of disbelief went through the crowd. Grandmother Rose had been a ghost in the manor for the last decade, rarely seen, rumored to be suffering from advanced dementia. Alistair had painted a picture of a woman lost to the fog of age. Alistair scoffed, regaining his composure. "My mother is unwell. She hasn't spoken a coherent sentence in years. She is legally incompetent. Anything she says is just you manipulating a sick old woman, Arthur." "Is that so?" The voice was raspy, unused, but sharp as broken glass. It didn't come from Arthur. It came from the wheelchair. Grandmother Rose slowly lifted her head. The shawl that usually obscured her face fell back, revealing eyes that were bright, alert, and burning with disappointment. She didn't look senile. She looked furious. "I have been quiet, Alistair," Rose said, her voice gaining strength. "Because I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to see what you would do when you thought no one was watching." Alistair took a step back, his face draining of color. "Mother, you're lucid?" "I am awake," Rose declared. She turned her gaze to Seraphina. The look was withering. "And I have seen enough. You have turned my home into a marketplace. You have filled it with sycophants and snakes." Rose then looked toward the door, where Elara stood frozen, still flanked by the confused security guards. "And you," Rose said, her voice softening. "My grandson's wife. Come here, child." Elara hesitated, glancing at the guards. "Let her go," Rose commanded, striking the armrest of her chair. "Immediately!" The guards released Elara as if she were made of fire. Elara walked slowly back into the center of the room, her hands still cradling her unborn child. She felt a mix of relief and terror. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so violently, it gave her vertigo. "Elara," Rose said when she was close. "I apologize. I should have stepped in sooner. I thought Liam would find his spine. I was wrong." Rose glared at Liam, who was shrinking into his tuxedo. "You stood by while this woman," she gestured to Seraphina, "insulted your wife. You let them put the mother of your child on a folding chair like a discarded coat." "Grandmother, Liam stammered. "It was complicated." Seraphina said. "I don't care what the hired help said," Rose snapped. Seraphina bristled. "Hired help? I am a partner at Thorne Consulting. I have saved this family's fortune." "You are a parasite," Rose said calmly, "and your tenure at Highgrove is over. Arthur, read the clause." Arthur adjusted his glasses and read from the document. "Upon the incapacity or moral failure of the male heir to protect the sanctity of the family, the matriarch reserves the right to designate a new custodian of the estate, bypassing the direct line of succession." Arthur looked up. Moral failure. I'd say public humiliation of a pregnant spouse qualifies. Rose reached out and took Elara's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Tonight, I am not transferring the deed to Alistair, and I am certainly not letting it fall into the hands of his mistress consultant. Until my great-grandchild is born and comes of age, Highgrove will be held in trust. And the sole administrator of that trust, with full veto power over who enters these gates, is Elara Vance Kensington. The room exploded. Flashbulbs went off like fireworks. "What?" Seraphina shrieked, her composure shattering. "She's a waitress. She doesn't know how to run an estate. Alistair, do something!" Alistair looked defeated. He knew the terms of his father's will better than anyone. He just never thought the old woman would wake up to enforce them. "Elara," Rose said, looking up at her. "You have the power now. What is your first order of business?" Elara looked around the room. She saw the guests who had mocked her. She saw Liam, looking at her with a mix of fear and awe. And she saw Seraphina, trembling with rage. Elara took a deep breath. "My first order," she said, her voice ringing clear, "is that the metal chair be removed. And Seraphina, you can take it with you when you leave." The aftermath of the gala was a chaotic blur, but for Elara, it was the first time in months she breathed fresh air. By the next morning, the dynamics of Highgrove had inverted. The guest wing, where Elara had been banished, was now being cleared out for Seraphina's departure, though the mistress was not going quietly. Elara sat in the sunroom of the master wing, quarters she had never been allowed to enter before. Grandmother Rose sat opposite her, sipping tea, looking tired but content. Arthur was there too, going over legal files on a tablet. "You know she won't just leave," Arthur said, not looking up. "Seraphina has entrenched herself deep in the company. Getting her out of the house is one thing. Getting her out of Kensington Global is another." "One step at a time," Rose said. "Elara, how are you feeling?" "Overwhelmed," Elara admitted. She looked out the window to the gardens where gardeners were dismantling the gala tents. "Liam tried to come in this morning. The security, your security, Arthur, stopped him." "Good," Rose nodded. "He needs to understand that access to you is a privilege, not a right. He forfeited that right when he let that woman humiliate you." "But he is my husband," Elara said softly, "and the father of this baby." "He is a boy playing a man's game," Arthur interjected. "And right now he's a liability. Seraphina has her claws in him. If we let him back in too soon, she comes back in with him." As if summoned by the mention of her name, a commotion erupted in the hallway. The heavy double doors burst open. It wasn't Liam. It was Seraphina, flanked by Alistair. "You can't do this!" Seraphina shouted, waving a piece of paper. "I have a contract. My residency at Highgrove is part of my consultancy compensation package. If you kick me out, I sue for breach of contract. $20 million! Alistair stood behind her, looking grim. "She's right, Mother. The contract is ironclad. I signed it myself." Elara stood up, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "You signed a contract giving her residency while I was living in the guest room?" Alistair refused to meet her eyes. "It was necessary for the business. Seraphina needed to be close to the headquarters." "The headquarters is in downtown Seattle," Arthur noted dryly. "This is a 40-minute commute. She didn't need to be here for work. She needed to be here to replace Elara." Seraphina smirked, smoothing her skirt. She had traded her evening gown for a sharp red power suit. She looked like a wound in the soft pastels of the sunroom. "It doesn't matter why I'm here. Legally, I am a tenant, and under Washington state law, you cannot evict a tenant without cause and notice. I'm not going anywhere." She walked over to the tea service and poured herself a cup, acting as if she still owned the place. "So, Elara, looks like we're roommates for a little longer. Try not to be too loud with the baby crying. I need my sleep. Elara felt the anger rising again, but this time it wasn't hot and tearful. It was cold. It was the icy resolve of a mother protecting her nest. "You can stay, Serafina," Elara said quietly. Rose and Arthur looked at her in shock. "Elara?" Arthur warned. "She can stay," Elara repeated, walking towards Serafina. "But the terms have changed. You are an employee of Kensington Global, correct?" "I am a senior consultant," Serafina corrected haughtily. "And as the administrator of the Highgrove Trust, I am technically your landlord," Elara said, her mind flashing back to the rental agreements she used to manage for her social work clients. "And I seem to recall a clause in the estate bylaws about commercial activity on the premises." Elara turned to Arthur. "Uncle Arthur, isn't there a zoning restriction? Highgrove is a historic landmark. Commercial businesses cannot operate out of the residential wings." Arthur's eyes lit up. He scrolled frantically on his tablet. "By Jove, she's right. Section 4, paragraph B. No commercial consultancy or external business operations can be headquartered within the manor walls without risking our tax-exempt status." Elara turned back to Serafina. "So you can stay, but you cannot work. No meetings, no calls, no staff. If you send a single business email from this IP address, you are endangering the estate's tax status, which is a breach of your lease. You want to live here? Fine. But you'll be living here as a guest, a bored, unemployed guest." Serafina's smile faltered. Her power came from her work, her control over the company. Without that base of operations, she was just a woman in a house she wasn't welcome in. "And," Elara added, stepping closer, looming over the seated mistress, "since you are so concerned with logistics, the guest wing you prepared for me, it's lovely. I think you'll fit right in. I'll have your things moved immediately." Serafina slammed the teacup down, shattering the saucer. "You think you're clever? You're just a pregnant girl with a lucky piece of paper. You have no idea what I'm capable of." "I know exactly what you're capable of," Elara said. "You're capable of cruelty, but you're about to learn that I'm capable of survival." A week passed. The tension in Highgrove was palpable, a silent war of attrition. Serafina had moved into the guest wing, but she prowled the grounds like a caged tiger. Liam was staying at a hotel in the city, calling Elara every day, leaving voicemails she didn't return. Elara spent her days with Rose, learning the history of the estate, and with Arthur, learning the tangled web of the family finances. She was learning that Kensington Global was not as robust as Alistair claimed. Serafina's restructuring had involved high-risk leveraging. The company was fragile. One rainy Tuesday, Elara was in the library, organizing the ledger books. She felt a sharp cramp. Braxton Hicks, she told herself. It was too early for labor. She was 36 weeks. "Busy, are we?" Serafina leaned against the doorframe. She looked disheveled, her perfect facade cracking. The isolation was getting to her. "What do you want, Serafina?" Elara asked, not looking up. "I just wanted to give you a heads up," Serafina said, walking into the room and tracing a finger along the dust of an ancient globe. "Liam and I had a long talk last night." Elara's pen stopped moving. "Liam is at the Four Seasons." "He came to see me," Serafina lied. Or perhaps she wasn't lying. "He's worried, Elara, about the baby." "He has nothing to be worried about. The baby is healthy." "Is it?" Serafina stopped spinning the globe. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "Because we found something interesting in your medical files. Or rather, the lack of them." "That's private information," Elara said, her heart hammering. "You know, Liam has always had doubts," Serafina said softly, her voice dripping with venom. "He remembers the timeline. You two met in October. You got pregnant in November. But he was away on business for 2 weeks in November. The math is tight." "That's a lie," Elara stood up, the cramps intensifying. Liam was there. We conceived on our anniversary trip. Did you? Serafina smiled. Or did you conceive with that barista you used to work with? The one who keeps liking your photos on Facebook? Elara felt dizzy. Get out. Liam is requesting a paternity test, Elara. Serafina dropped the bomb. He's filing the motion tomorrow, and until the results are in, he's going to freeze the assets. He won't let a bastard child inherit Highgrove. It was a bluff. Elara knew deep down it was a bluff. Liam was weak, but he wasn't evil. He knew the baby was his. But the stress, the accusation, the sheer malice of it hit Elara physically. A sharp, searing pain tore through her abdomen. It wasn't a cramp this time. It was a contraction. A real one. Elara gasped, grabbing the edge of the mahogany desk. Water pooled at her feet, soaking into the Persian rug. Serafina looked down at the water, then up at Elara. For a second, Elara saw a flicker of panic in the other woman's eyes, quickly replaced by cold opportunity. "Oh dear," Serafina whispered. "Looks like the little heir is coming early." "Help me," Elara gritted out, reaching for her phone. Serafina took the phone from the desk. She looked at it, then looked at Elara. "I could call an ambulance," Serafina mused, "but the reception in this library is so spotty. I might have to go all the way to the guest wing to get a signal." "Serafina, please!" Elara cried out, doubling over in pain. "The baby. The baby that might not even be a Kensington," Serafina said, backing away toward the door, holding Elara's phone. "You know, stress causes complications. If something were to happen, if the baby didn't make it, the trust dissolves, doesn't it? The deed reverts to Alistair." Elara's eyes went wide with horror. Serafina wasn't just bullying her. She was leaving her to labor alone, hoping for a tragedy. "You're a monster," Elara whispered. "I'm a businesswoman," Serafina said, and she closed the heavy library doors, locking them from the outside with a solid click. Elara was alone, trapped in the soundproof library, in labor. She screamed for help, but the walls of Highgrove were thick, built to keep secrets in. She dragged herself toward the window, but the pain dropped her to her knees. "Think, Elara. Think." She looked around the room, the fireplace, the heavy brass poker, the window. But then she saw it, under the desk, where Arthur had been working earlier, his old, bulky laptop. She crawled toward it, praying it had battery. She opened it. It was locked. Password. Password. Arthur was a historian. He loved the classics. Pericles, Highgrove, Rose. She tried Rose, 1950. Incorrect. Another contraction ripped through her, making her vision blur. She had minutes before the pain incapacitated her. She thought of Arthur's favorite quote, the one he always told her when she felt out of place. "Courage is the first of human qualities." She typed, "Churchill." The screen unlocked. She didn't try to call Liam. He wouldn't answer unknown numbers. She didn't email Alistair. She opened the internal intercom system, a digital network Arthur had installed to monitor the estate's security. She accessed the all-call function, which broadcasted to every speaker in the house, including the staff quarters and the gatehouse. Elara leaned into the laptop microphone, her voice broken and sobbing. "This is Elara. I am in the library. My water broke. Serafina has locked me in. She is trying to kill my baby. Someone, please." Her head hit the keyboard as darkness encroached. The last thing she heard wasn't the silence of the library. It was the sound of the lock on the door shattering as a heavy boot kicked it open. The wood of the library door splintered inward, showering the Persian rug with shards of mahogany and gold leaf. Elara, curled on the floor in a pool of pain and amniotic fluid, looked up through a haze of tears. Framed in the broken doorway wasn't the police or the paramedics. It was Uncle Arthur, The man who usually wore tweed jackets and smelled of old books looked like a titan. He held a heavy fire axe from the hallway emergency case, his chest heaving. Behind him stood the estate's head of security, Marcus, and two terrified maids who had heard Elara's desperate plea over the intercom. "Elara!" Arthur dropped the axe and fell to his knees beside her, disregarding the water and blood soaking his trousers. "We're here. You're safe." She took my phone," Elara gasped, clutching Arthur's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve as another contraction seized her body. "She locked me in. She said the trust dissolves if the baby dies." Arthur's face, usually so kind, hardened into a mask of pure, cold fury. He looked up at Marcus. "Where is she?" "Miss Thorne was detained at the main gate, sir," Marcus replied, his voice grim. "She was trying to leave in Mr. Kensington's Ferrari. She claimed she was rushing to get help, but she had 3 suitcases in the trunk." "Keep her there," Arthur commanded. "If she tries to leave, arrest her for attempted manslaughter. I don't care who she threatens to sue." "Arthur," Elara groaned, her body arching. "The baby, it's coming, now." Arthur looked at the maids. "Call 911. Tell them we have a high-risk birth in progress. And get clean towels, hot water, and the medical kit from the West Wing. Now." The next hour was a blur of agony and chaos. The storm outside battered the windows of Highgrove, mirroring the violence inside. Because the ambulance was delayed by the weather, Elara Vance Kensington, the girl from Ohio who had been treated like a servant in her own home, gave birth on the floor of the ancestral library, surrounded by the smell of ancient paper and the fierce protection of the family black sheep. When the final push came, it was Arthur who held her hand, whispering words of encouragement while the head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, acted as the midwife. "One more, Elara. Fight for him," Arthur urged. With a scream that tore through the pretenses of the polite society they lived in, Elara pushed. Silence followed. A terrifying, heavy silence. "Is he?" Elara whispered, her head falling back, exhaustion pulling her under. Then, a sound. Small at first, then growing into a robust, indignant wail. The cry of life. "He's here," Mrs. Gable wept, wrapping the slick infant in a cashmere throw she had pulled from a sofa. "It's a boy, Mrs. Kensington. A strong, beautiful boy. Tom." She placed the baby on Elara's chest. He was tiny, red-faced, and perfect. He had Liam's nose, but he had Elara's chin, the chin that had refused to tremble when Serafina mocked her. Just as the baby's cries filled the room, the sound of sirens cut through the storm. The paramedics had arrived. And right behind them, sprinting into the room soaking wet and pale as a ghost, was Liam. He stopped at the door, taking in the scene. The broken door. The blood, Arthur kneeling protectively over Elara, and the baby crying in her arms. "Elara!" Liam choked out, stepping forward. "Stay back!" Arthur barked, not moving from his spot. "That's my son," Liam whispered, tears mixing with the rain on his face. I heard the intercom recording. Marcus played it for me at the gate." "She locked you in?" Elara looked at her husband. She saw the horror in his eyes. He hadn't known Serafina was capable of murder, but he had created the environment where Serafina felt she could get away with it. "He is your son," Elara said, her voice weak but steady. "But you are not his father. Not tonight." She looked down at the infant. "Tonight he is mine. Just mine." 3 days later, the atmosphere at Highgrove was unrecognizable. The silence of the manor was replaced by the efficient hum of lawyers, auditors, and police. Elara was recovering in the master suite, the baby, named Leo Arthur Kensington, sleeping in a bassinet beside her. She sat up in bed, reviewing documents. She wasn't just a mother now, she was the administrator. A knock came at the door. "Come in." It was Alistair. The patriarch looked 10 years older than he had at the gala. He leaned heavily on a cane, his arrogance stripped away. May I see him? Alistair asked, his voice humble. You can look from there, Elara said, gesturing to the foot of the bed. She didn't offer him a chair. Alistair peered into the bassinet. He looks like my father. Like Elias. He looks like himself, Elara corrected. Why are you here, Alistair? Alistair sighed, sinking onto the ottoman at the end of the bed. The police have formally charged Serafina. Kidnapping, reckless endangerment, and corporate fraud. Elara raised an eyebrow. Fraud? Arthur and the auditors found it, Alistair admitted, looking at his hands. The restructuring she did? She was funneling millions out of Kensington Global into offshore shell companies under her name. She was bankrupting us, Elara. Another 6 months, and Highgrove would have been foreclosed. She wasn't trying to marry Liam for the family name. She was trying to strip the carcass clean and leave. Elara felt a chill. And you didn't see it? The great Alistair Kensington? I was blinded, Alistair whispered. By her pedigree, by her confidence. I thought she was the daughter-in-law I deserved. I thought you were weak. He looked up at her, tears in his eyes. I was wrong. You survived her. You saved the heir. You saved the house. I didn't do it for you, Elara said coldly. I did it for Leo. I know, Alistair nodded. I have a resignation letter here. From the board of directors. I am stepping down as CEO. The scandal is too great. The investors are spooked. He placed a heavy envelope on the duvet. Who will run the company? Elara asked. Liam? Alistair shook his head. Liam is broken. He is in therapy. He realized he almost got his wife and child killed because he was too cowardly to stand up to a bully. He is not ready to lead. Alistair looked at Elara with a strange, newfound respect. The bylaws of the trust state that the administrator of Highgrove has a seat on the board, a controlling seat. Elara picked up the envelope. I have a degree in social work, Alistair. I help people. I don't run conglomerates. You have the instinct, Alistair said. You saw through Serafina when none of us did. You used the estate's bylaws to trap her. You used the intercom to save yourself. You are smarter than all of us, Elara, and you are the only one with clean hands. He stood up to leave. Arthur will help you. He's agreed to come back as chief legal officer. But the company, the legacy, it's yours to salvage. As Alistair shuffled out, the door opened again. 2 police officers were escorting a handcuffed woman down the hallway. It was Serafina. She wasn't wearing Chanel. She was wearing a gray oversized hoodie, her hair messy, her makeup smeared. She looked directly into the room as she passed. Her eyes met Elara's. There was no defiance left. Only fear. The fear of a woman who had played a high-stakes game and lost everything. Elara didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just looked at Serafina, then looked down at her son, and gently closed the door. 1 year later, the garden of Highgrove was in full bloom, a riot of hydrangeas and roses. White tents were set up on the lawn, but this wasn't a stiff, aristocratic gala. It was a first birthday party. Children were running everywhere, not just the children of the elite, but children from the community center where Elara used to work. There was a face painting station, a bouncy castle that looked like a castle, and a jazz band playing upbeat tunes. Elara stood on the terrace, watching the scene. She wore a simple, elegant white sundress. She looked radiant, not because of the expensive fabric, but because of the peace that radiated from her. He's destroying the cake, a voice said beside her. Elara laughed. Down on the lawn, 1-year-old Leo was sitting in a high chair, smashing a piece of blue velvet cake with both fists, giggling maniacally. Liam stood next to the high chair, wiping frosting off Leo's cheek. Liam looked different. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing jeans and a polo shirt. He looked healthier, less haunted, though the sadness in his eyes when he looked up at Elara on the terrace was palpable. "He's a Kensington," Elara smiled. "He likes to make a mess." Arthur stepped up beside her, holding a glass of lemonade. "You've done a good job, Elara, with the boy, and the company." In the last year, Elara hadn't just saved Kensington Global, she had transformed it. She had shifted the company's focus from predatory acquisitions to sustainable development and community housing. The stock price had initially dipped, then soared as the public embraced the new Kensington era. "We posted a profit this quarter," Elara noted. Alistair was surprised. "Alistair is surprised by everything these days," Arthur chuckled. "He's actually enjoying retirement. I saw him gardening yesterday. Actually gardening, with dirt on his hands." Elara looked back at Liam. He was laughing as Leo smeared frosting on his nose. "He's trying, isn't he?" Elara asked softly. "He is," Arthur agreed. "He's working in the architectural division now. Junior draftsman, no special treatment. He wants to earn his way back, to himself. And maybe, to you." Elara sighed, touching the gold locket around her neck. Inside was a picture of Leo. "I've forgiven him, Arthur, for my own peace. But trust..." "Trust is a deed," Arthur quoted, looking at the manor behind them. "It has to be signed, sealed, and delivered over time." Elara walked down the steps onto the grass. The crowd parted for her, not out of fear, as they had for Serafina, but out of genuine affection. She was the woman who had opened the gates of Highgrove to the city. She walked up to the high chair. Liam froze, looking at her nervously. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Elara replied. She reached out and took a napkin, gently wiping a smudge of frosting from Liam's own cheek. It was a small gesture, but it was the first time she had touched him affectionately in a year. Liam's breath hitched. "Elara, thank you for letting me be here." "He needs his father," Elara said, looking at Leo. "And I think he needs the version of his father that draws pictures and plays in the dirt, not the heir." "I'm done being the heir," Liam said earnestly. "I just want to be Liam." "Well, Liam," Elara smiled, picking up her son, who immediately got frosting on her dress. "Grab a plate. It's time for the toast." Elara turned to the guests. She didn't need a microphone. She had found her voice long ago in that library. "Thank you all for coming," she called out, "to celebrate Leo, and to celebrate Highgrove. For a long time, this house was a fortress, a place where people hid behind walls and titles. But a house is not a home until you let the light in." She raised her glass. "To resilience, to family, the one you're born into and the one you build." "To Elara," Arthur shouted. "To Elara!" The crowd roared back. High above them, in the window of the master suite, the curtain twitched. Grandmother Rose was watching, a satisfied smile on her face. She watched the girl from Ohio, the waitress, the mistress of the metal chair, holding court as the true queen of Highgrove. The deed was safe. The legacy was safe. And for the first time in a century, the mansion was not a golden cage, but a home. The story of Elara is a powerful reminder that true power doesn't come from titles, wealth, or aggression. Serafina had all the trappings of power, the degrees, the beauty, the ruthlessness, but she lacked the substance of character. Elara, stripped of everything and humiliated publicly, found strength in her vulnerability and her love for her child. In the end, the true owner of the mansion wasn't just the person with the name on the deed. It was the person who possessed the courage to protect the vulnerable and the integrity to stand against injustice. It teaches us that while ambition can build a house, Only love and authenticity can sustain a home. Elara's journey from a bullied wife to a powerful matriarch inspires us to believe that no matter how small we are made to feel, our truth is our greatest weapon. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth always reveals itself in the end. See you next time.